Hello and welcome to this week's Gene Keys and Goddess Asteroid podcast, where we look at a synthesis of the gene keys. My specialism is the Goddess Asteroid, but we're going to talk about some other really interesting things that are going on. So I'm making this on Monday, the 22nd of November, and we're in the middle of this period between this very powerful lunar eclipse that just happened on the Scorpio-Taurus axis, the 8-14 axis. And then we are heading towards a solar eclipse on the 4th of December, and that's actually in the early part of Sagittarius in Ophiuchus, which is the 13th sign of the healer. Ophiuchus holds the male and female serpents. So he represents the balance of the yin and the yang that we see moving throughout the hexagrams in their different variations. And this is the building blocks of our DNA. So exciting times, and feels like quite an awakening for Ophiuchus. There was actually a supernova in Ophiuchus in August of this year. And supernovas can be an incredible release of cosmic energy and wisdom. So it feels like the solar eclipse is going to be bringing that into our attention. Okay, so the sun has just entered Sagittarius and Gene Key 34 line 1 today. And this is exactly conjunct what we call the South Node. And the South Node represents what's happened in the past. It's the karmic history, if you like. It's a portal into the Akashic records of all that has been. And 34 has the, it's got the shadow of force. It's got the gift of strength, and the city is majesty. So it's very interesting because what has been big in the news today is the force that's being used in European countries at the moment around the whole vaccine issue. So whether you're for or against the vaccine, I'd just like you to kind of suspend that for the moment and tune in to the use of force is the kind of issue here. And I know for myself, I found this period, one of the most difficult things for me is I grew up under apartheid in South Africa. It was a extremely repressive society, a very violent society. You know, the police often used live ammunition as they have today, and in the last few days in Holland. It's like just shocking really for me to think that that could actually happen. But this was a regular occurrence when I grew up, this kind of use of force. And of course, there's always a story that goes with it. You know, this is why we have to use this force. In those days, it was all to do with the Cold War and the fear of communists. And, you know, if we look at what happened in the Second World War around concentration camps, you know, there's a similar, there's always a story that the public buy into as to why this force is needed. But whenever we use force, it is a shadow. And so it always has a shadow effect as well. You know, it never really leads to the hoped outcome. And I think, you know, we can all possibly relate to this. If you've had children, you will definitely have felt, unless you're some kind of saint, the urge to use force at some time, you know, when your children just will not listen to you, and you have a really legitimate thing, you know, you want them to eat, or you want them to eat some healthy food, or you want them to go to school or whatever. And when this is met with their kind of will saying no to that, then the parent, as the person in power, often resorts to the use of force. But we know now that this can be very traumatizing for children, and perhaps if you're watching this, you have had things forced on you. Um, and another whole level of this is around medical procedures, and it's interesting as an astrologer how often medical procedures can come up as traumas in people's lives, because it is a loss of control around your own body. So in that sense, it can be experienced very similar to a sexual assault situation where the body is invaded and you lose all control. So we should be aware of that in all of this. I believe in California as well, it's just become mandatory for adolescents to have the vaccine. So one issue in that is, have anyone considered the impact of that on a trauma level of forcing a young person to literally be injected with something quite dangerous, in the sense that a vaccine could react with someone. And different people will have, some people will be fine with it and other people will have a reaction to it. But it's more the use of force. So it's very interesting, I think, that this is all blowing up as the sun moves into gene key 34. And who else we have here is Vesta, and she is the goddess of, she's a priestess archetype, but she also represents sovereignty. And so this is another issue that I think we're seeing in perhaps a deeper issue in people who are really against vaccination, that it's actually about this is my body and this is my body to decide what happens to it. And we're also seeing a lot of rage coming out in people, like real rage. And this kind of rage can be where boundaries have been crossed, and I'm not saying it's appropriate to use violence, but you can see the rage is there, and the rage has a reason, and the kind of domination of someone's will ultimately leads to, first to resentment, then to anger, and then to rage, and to violence. So then we can see how force kind of turns into force, and you get this explosion of violence there. Okay, so as if that wasn't enough tension in the world, I'm going to screen share now because I want to show you what's going on with Uranus and Mars and Saturn. Okay, so let's begin with Mars here. Mars is at 15 degrees Scorpio, 25 minutes. This is actually gene key 1, line 3. So it's the pure yang energy. So Mars in pure yang is kind of yang magnified, but also I feel the possibility of the purification of the yang. You know, even though we're having these outbursts of anger, I feel that this field could be purified if it was looked at as a trauma, like a collective trauma event, what is unfolding. And then we can have a more compassionate approach, and also an approach to understanding what the deeper triggers are, and hopefully understanding that the more force that's used, the worse the problem is going to get. You know, so yeah, it's an interesting one. Now, if we look opposite here in Taurus, there we have Uranus. Now, Uranus has been in Gene Key 2, and you can see here is retrograde at the moment. So it's gone back into Gene Key 24, line 6. This is the shadow of addiction, and it's the city of silence. So this is a powerful place for Uranus, is a liberator, to break free from doing things in the same old way. You know, we have these neural pathways, person not listening to me, person creating danger, use force, you know, and and it doesn't work, you know, so use more force. It still doesn't work. And if there's one thing I learned about growing up under apartheid, is the more you go towards force and violence, the more it comes towards you. And the more you embrace peace and equality, the more that comes towards you. So, you know, people who sleep with guns under their pillows are the most likely people to get shot, in my humble opinion. Okay, so we have that. So oppositions, this creates like a dynamic, you know, these two planets are pulling and pushing against each other. Mars is our will, our passion. Uranus is this liberating thing. It can bring really shocking events like, you know, police in Holland opening fire on people. In Austria, they're saying they're going to literally pin people down and vaccinate them. Well, I don't know how that's going to play out, but yeah, it's there's definitely a shock factor in it. You know, probably even like the most conservative people are getting a bit itchy at that one. And then we have here Saturn. So Saturn is coming in at a square 90-degree angle to this. So this is creating even more tension. And Saturn is in Gene Key 19 in the line 1. So this is all about codependence. So we can see how codependence and addiction are really related to each other, and how they relate then to the shadow of Gene Key 1, which is entropy. You know, you have addiction dragging you down, spiraling downwards, maybe addiction to force, addiction to violence. And then we have, you know, this 19, this codependence, this ability to not be a sovereign being, you know, to kind of be over-reliant on authority figures telling us what to do, and not able to make the right choices for ourselves. And of course the powers that be don't really want us to be sovereign beings, because then the game is over. You know, the game of manipulation and all of that is finito when we become sovereign beings. And this is precisely what Vesta is here. She's in 34, line 4, conjunct the Sun and the South Node. So that kind of energy of the sovereign priestess, shamanka, which is the shamanic tradition of Siberia and Russia. You know, this is very much linked to indigenous peoples, the plant kingdoms as well, this energy. Okay, so we've talked about that. What else did I want to talk about? Uh, okay, so here we have Saturn. We just talked about Saturn. Gene key 19, line 1. This is 8 degrees Aquarius. And if we look at this little blue line here, this is a 60-degree aspect called a sextile. And this is going to Chiron, is at 8 degrees Aries, 60 degrees away. So this is a positive aspect, especially when used consciously. So let's have a look at, Chiron has been going retrograde for a while, is now back in gene key 17, line 6. This is the shadow of opinion. It's the gift of farsightedness, and it's the city of omniscience. So if we put the gifts of Saturn and Chiron together, I think we come up with something quite interesting, which is 19 is sensitivity. And sensitivity for me is an intelligence. Sensitivity when I was a child was like an insult. You're too sensitive. But actually, the more I've got into the goddess energy and my own healing process, my own opening process, the more I see and understand sensitivity is a gift, and it's the way of being of the future human being, to be emotionally sensitive, to be sensitive to environmental energies, to be sensitive to the kind of food that we're putting into our bodies. And then we have the gift of farsightedness. So if we're in the gift of sensitivity, I feel that this helps us to be much more farsighted in how we look at the future. And it feels like it might help us not use force so much, because if we think about this, we could do things in a different way. And one of the sort of medical commentators in Britain was on the radio about what's going on in Europe, and the thing he was saying is that if force is used to give people the vaccine, then actually that's a massive failure of communication, of the medical profession failing to engage with people, to talk to them, to listen to their concerns, to just to have an intelligent response. Because for me, force is a primal response, but it's not necessarily an intelligent response. And this is what Chiron's all about, the merging actually of the primal instinctive animal nature with the intellect and our ability to actually come up with an intelligent solution. Okay, so I've talked quite a bit there. I'm going to leave it there for today. There is some other really interesting little bits. I've just mentioned that Juno is in gene key 10, line 6. She's the goddess of the sacred marriage. So this is all about naturalness and beingness, being enough just for who we are. And then we have Pallas Athena in 37, line 5, and she is the warrior goddess in Pisces. So she really carries this bodhisattva, compassionate energy, which is what I pray breaks through as we navigate these difficult times as humanity, dealing with this pandemic and all the loss that has come about from that, and all the changes that we're having to make. But perhaps it can force also in facing the shadow, seeing the darkness for what it is. It can bring out something new, a new fresh way of being, fresh ways of responding. So thank you so much for listening. And my next podcast will be on the solar eclipse next week. So keep a lookout for that. I do offer one-to-one readings, which are focused around the goddess asteroids. And I also do gene key readings, and I teach, or I guide rather, I guide gene keys on a platform called Soul Tribe Online. So I will put my email address, astroalison@gmail.com, in the information bit of this. So please feel free to contact me, and we can set up a Zoom call or however you would like to do it. So namaste, go in peace. Bye.